everybody. How are you? So, we're going to get exceedingly personal today. I am going to share something with you, like in its entirety. We're going to go through it, and basically it is going to be an entire video of me talking about me. And since I'm some, irrelevant rando, I don't blame you for clicking away now. Otherwise, I'm going to show you my assessment. I took Dr. Jordan Peterson's Big 5 assessment test. I was curious about it. I've always wondered how I would measure up and things like that. And basically it is my chance to demonstrate, just let people see what the type of person looks like that you are not. The type of person you don't think about, don't care about, doesn't matter. The irrelevant person, right? The outcast, the one who is the person that is anxiety ridden, the person that is exceedingly depressed, sometimes for no reason. It's a part of their life. The socially awkward person, the misfit, the genuinely undesirable person, the one that women want nothing to do with, and the person that doesn't talk to anybody and hates social interaction and hates being in public, and the exceedingly introverted human, the person that just doesn't fit in, definitely the person that's never been too particularly successful at anything, just basically unexceptional and mediocre and as easily forgettable and as low on the relevancy scale as you can kind of be. I mean, your average nobody, a true, actual, irrelevant, unknown nobody. Some of us are just that way. Me personally, I know my flaws. I've known my flaws my whole life, and I'm not even mad about it. I accept things as I see them for what they are, and it's okay. But this assessment is quite thorough. There's some data points in there that I personally can't say I agree with, because you'll see what I mean. But I'm gonna hop right in. Now, of course, I've taken a second to scribble out my name here because I don't need that. Don't really want to share that. Let me see if I can make this a little bigger and better. This will work. So, from Dr. Peterson's website, understandmyself.com, they have this assessment report that you pay $10 for, and it is a analysis of it presents this series of questions, or they're not questions per se, but they kind of are, but they're more like phrases or statements to which you select strongly disagree to strongly agree. Like there's a scale, strongly disagree, neither agree or disagree, agree or strongly agree. So, not terribly complex, not complicated. There are times, I think it was 100 questions I answered, and there are times when some of the questions seem to be repeated with slightly different wording. The phrasing of some of these things is really wordy, and some of it I was caught off guard. And I understand that things like these can be inaccurate, but this type of assessment test isn't exactly it's not one of those stupid Facebook games or phone games or whatever that, how do you compare to a loaf of bread or, stupid stuff like that. As far as I can tell, this was based on an actual scientific model, an accepted model that is, you'll see. I'm just going to kind of go through this. Understand Myself Personality Assessment Report. The Understand Myself personality assessment and report is based on the Big Five aspect scale, the scientific model that describes your personality through the Big Five factors and each of their two aspects. So, obviously, this model, which I've never heard of until this test, is based on 5 factors that each have 2 sub-factors. All right. So 10 points of data total, I guess, is a way to look at it. This report describes where you stand in comparison to others in the general population on these traits and aspects. So this is the short version right here. I am, obviously, based on my answers, not agreeable, not extroverted, obviously, conscientious, poorly, shocker, I guess, openness, low to mid, and neuroticism, high. So I never actually understood, I never knew what the proper meaning of what being neurotic actually meant. I thought I did. I was wrong. So I'm exceedingly neurotic. That doesn't surprise me. So, the traits and aspects of the Big Five personality model are agreeableness, which breaks down into compassion and politeness; conscientiousness, which breaks down into industriousness and orderliness. Industriousness is one that I apparently didn't rank well on, and I'm shocked because I've always been a worker, always had a job, and always advanced in every job I've ever had. I've never needed to be particularly supervised and directed in that manner, but we'll get to it. Point number 3, extraversion, enthusiasm and assertiveness. 4, neuroticism, withdrawal and volatility. Lastly, openness, intellect and aesthetics. Now, their definition of intellect is a whole other world, because we'll get there. I'll move on. In the original Big Five aspect scale model, the openness factor was entitled openness to experience, and its aspects were called intellect and openness. For the sake of clarity, we have deviated from this and use openness or openness to experience to refer to the factor level trait, and intellect and aesthetics to refer to its aspects. Our systems have compared your self-ratings to those of thousands of other people. You are being compared to men and women of all ages. This means that if you are young, your scores on neuroticism will be higher, and on agreeableness and conscientiousness will be lower than if you were compared to people of your own age, with the reverse being true for older individuals. I'm going to roll past some of their explanation of their system here. I want to get right into the meat and bones. So, first, my agreeableness is exceptionally low. You are exceptionally low in agreeableness, which is the primary dimension of interpersonal interaction in the Big Five personality trait scientific model. The 2 aspects of agreeableness are compassion and politeness. Your score puts you in the 2nd percentile for agreeableness. If you were one of 100 people in a room, you would be lower in agreeableness than 97% of them, and higher in agreeableness than 2 of them. I am exceptionally low on agreeableness. Agreeableness is a very complex trait with marked positive and negative elements all along its distribution. Because of this, higher scores and lower scores need to be explained at the same time. People high in agreeableness are nice, compliant, nurturing, kind, naively trusting, and conciliatory. However, because of their tendency to avoid conflict, they often dissemble and hide what they think. People low in agreeableness are not so nice, stubborn, dominant, harsh, skeptical, competitive, and in the extreme, even predatory. However, they tend to be straightforward, even blunt, so you know where they stand. People with exceptionally low levels of agreeableness are seen by others as markedly competitive, colder, tougher, and very much less empathetic. Now, those points, I guess, are kind of my attitude, with the exception of competitive. I despise competition in terms of, like, I don't compete with anything. I don't have any traits or skills with which to compete with anybody on anything. So I think that particular element doesn't apply to me. But whatever. Anyway, they do not easily see the best in others and are not particularly tolerant, an attitude that is much valued by agreeable people. They are very much less concerned about the emotional state of others and are uncommonly willing to engage in conflict, will happily sacrifice peace and harmony to make a point, or, if conscientious, to get things done. People may find them painfully straightforward and blunt. They tend very strongly towards dominance rather than submission, particularly if also below average in neuroticism. People with exceptionally low levels of agreeableness do not at all easily forgive. They're definitely not accepting, flexible, gentle, or patient. I guess that's kind of true. They feel minimal pity for those who are excluded, punished, or defeated, and attribute such problems to weakness or inability. They are also extremely unlikely to be taken advantage of by disagreeable, manipulative, or otherwise troublesome people, or those with criminal or predatory intent. Their extraordinarily high levels of skepticism play a protective role, although it often interferes with their ability to cooperate with or trust others whose intentions are genuinely good. They are also much less likely to reward good behavior or to give credit where it is due. I don't know that I agree with that. I will always give credit to someone I respect for having done something that affects me, but they cooperate grudgingly and only when cooperation is in their clear self-interest, preferring competition with its well-defined winners and losers. So, again, the competition thing I don't think is me. The notion of well-defined losers and winners, it to me is a blatantly obvious fact of life, regardless of your age, sex, gender, and so on and so on. It doesn't matter. You're either a failure or you're not. And speaking as a failure, I get it. Anywho, they do not lose arguments or avoid discussions with anyone for any reason and enjoy the battle. This can interfere with their ability to learn from experience, their own or others. They are very likely to be expert at bargaining for themselves and at negotiating for more recognition or power, and are likely to have higher salaries and to earn more money in consequence. People exceptionally low in agreeableness are therefore less likely to suffer from resentment or to harbor invisible anger. They let you know exactly what they think when they think it, whether you want to know it or not. In addition, because of their tendency to engage in conflict at a moment's notice, people exceptionally low in agreeableness do not sacrifice medium to long-term stability and functionality for the sake of short-term peace. Kind of valid. This means that problems that should be solved in the present are often solved, quickly and harshly. This means that such problems may not accumulate counterproductively across time. The price paid for this? People close to those exceptionally low in agreeableness will frequently experience them as overbearing and uncaring. The political part I'm going to skip. The women part I'm going to skip. Norway, Sweden. So anyways, trait number 1 of myself. I am not agreeable. I am not a nice person. Polite and mannered are not exactly what they're referring to there, obviously, but my temperament and things, I get it. Part 2 I thought I would share. Compassion exceptionally low. You are exceptionally low in compassion. Compassion is an aspect of agreeableness. The other aspect of agreeableness is politeness. My score puts me at the 0th percentile. If I were one of 100 people in a room, I would be lower in compassion than 99 of them. So, their definition of phrases like polite and like compassion, things like that, are a bit different than mine. I'm not good at, because of my personal, again, my introversion, my extreme discomfort with trying to be social and be engaging and be at all worth talking to, really. Like, I have a disdain for all of that that's so strong that I probably am generally not particularly compassionate. Anyway, exceptionally less compassionate people are not at all oriented towards the problems of other people or living things. They are not swayed or emotionally engaged by helplessness or cuteness. They are very willing, even happy, to make other people experience negative emotion by engaging in conflict and competition. Again, the first part of that statement I agree with. That's me. The second part, conflict and competition, that requires a type of engagement that I'm not into as far as I know, but apparently the questions I answered seem to think otherwise. They want to win, period, and will engage in the confrontation necessary to do so. They are therefore very much less concerned about helping other people. They make certain their own needs and interests are attended to, and are extraordinarily unwilling to sacrifice for the sake of other people's comfort. This can make them harsh and unsympathetic. People might turn to them for the blunt, cold, hard truth, but never for a soft, patient, eternally listening ear. That much is absolutely true. I'm not the one for that. They are remarkably less empathetic and caring. However, because they are not primarily other-oriented, they can negotiate expertly on their own behalf and get at least what they deserve, and perhaps more. In consequence, they are unlikely to harbor feelings of resentment or hidden anger. They find it difficult to trust. However, even when such trust would be productive, and other people are likely to find them callous and unfeeling. Those who are liberal politically score somewhat higher in compassion. I don't care about that. Politeness, moderately low. You are moderately low in politeness. Politeness is an aspect of agreeableness. The other aspect of agreeableness is compassion. Your score puts you at the 26th percentile for politeness. People who are moderately low in politeness are not particularly deferential to authority, nor are they markedly obedient. They can be respectful, but only to people who clearly deserve it, and they are willing to push back when challenged. They are not particularly uncomfortable confronting other people. Again, I don't know that conflict and competition are necessarily my particular, like the way I think of them. But I mean, for example, you've often seen on my own channel, like my battle jacket, because it represents a lot of the things I love the most in life. And I've expressed many times, and will always do so, that I don't really care if someone dislikes it, thinks it's childish, thinks it's stupid, thinks my taste in music sucks, or whatever. I don't care. Do not care. I'm not backing down from being myself. So, people moderately low in politeness are not particularly motivated to avoid conflict or to steer clear of conflict or fights. Those who are liberal politically score somewhat lower in politeness than conservatives. Conscientious, moderately low. You are moderately low in conscientiousness, which is the primary dimension of dutiful achievement in the Big Five personality trait scientific model. Your score puts you at the 35th percentile for conscientiousness. Conscientiousness is a measure of obligation, attention to detail, hard work, persistence, cleanliness, efficiency, adherence to rules, standards, and processes. Conscientious people implement their plans and establish and maintain order. The two aspects of conscientiousness are industriousness and orderliness. People moderately low in conscientiousness are not particularly dutiful. They are by no means sloggers. They will only work hard if pushed and don't mind wasting time. They are quite likely to procrastinate, particularly if they are also above average in neuroticism. If people with moderately low levels of conscientiousness commit to doing something, there is a good chance they will be delayed, be late or delayed, even if there isn't much reason for it. They tend to find and deliver excuses for their failure under such circumstances. They are not markedly decisive, neat, organized, future-oriented, or reliable, and they find themselves easily distracted. So, that is the one of these that I just vehemently disagree with, because even like my own coworkers, if you ask them about me, would not agree with that. I have worked since I was 16 years old. I take my work very seriously because my income, my ability to stand on my own 2 feet and take care of myself has always been a huge top priority for me. I have never been the guy to have to walk to work or to ride the bus. I've made bad choices, not necessarily related to my work, but at one point in my early 20s, I was even homeless for about 6 months, but I had a car and I got to work. I've even done telemarketing once. Me, the person that does not talk to people well, because I needed a job and I had to get some things together. And so that point, I don't know what question or questions came about that I answered that gave me this result, because I do not slack off at work or waste time. I am not friendly at work because I am there to work. Like, that's just how I was brought up. So that one I'm truly confused on. I've never, in my entire working life, I've never been terminated from a job. I've never been let go. That's never happened. Not one time. So anyway, people with moderately low levels of conscientiousness are less likely to obtain higher grades in academic settings, particularly if they are also less intelligent. That is me. And then, and generally require substantial supervision to stay on task. Again, I usually take over leadership roles in every job I've ever had, which isn't a lot. My job history, I've been with every job I've ever had. I don't need all the fingers on both hands to even count years of tenure. Anyway, for this reason, they make less than optimal managers and administrators. They do not feel compelled to do things by the book, however. This can perhaps be an advantage if they are engaged in creative tasks where rules must be broken for advancement to take place. They are unlikely to make career accomplishment a primary goal, turning instead to the pursuit of safety and security if high in neuroticism, creative accomplishment if high in openness, establishment of intimate relationships and friendships if highly agreeable, which none of that applies, no incel, that, or social success, excitement and fun if extroverted. People moderately low in conscientiousness tend to be relatively free of guilt, shame, self-disgust, and self-contempt. Other people may react negatively to their tendency to slack off, particularly if those other people are disagreeable and conscientious. Individuals who are moderately low in conscientiousness are not particularly concerned by failure. They are not judgmental to themselves or others. Oh, yes, I am. They can handle periods of inactivity and unemployment with relative ease. Again, that one vehemently frustrates me. That is not my... I have to have a job. I've never been that type. Anyway, regardless, whatever I answered or whatever was asked, I seem to be low in conscientiousness. Industriousness low. You are low in industriousness. Industriousness is an aspect of conscientiousness. 22nd percentile. People who are low in industriousness are much less likely to be successful in school and administrative and managerial positions, particularly if they are also less intelligent. If they are highly intelligent, they tend to be regarded as underachievers. They focus less on work than others and are substantially more likely to procrastinate, miss deadlines, or fail to complete assignments or projects completely. They put off responsibilities, concentrating more on fun, worry, relationships, excitement, or creative endeavor. They aren't concerned with schedules, timelines, or efficiency. That is literally my job that I currently do and have for the last 9 years, and will have to be supervised excessively before their tasks will be completed. They lack focus and are too easily distracted. People low in industriousness are not judgmental to themselves or others. If you've ever heard me talk, I don't believe that is particularly a valid trait of mine either. They let people, including themselves, off the hook. Nope, I sure do not. Ever. They believe that people fail not because they don't apply themselves or work hard, but because chance and luck play the determining roles. Now, in terms of things like the genetic lottery, tell me how that's not true. How that's not true. I've used examples in the past of you can only do so much to change your appearance, but your face, the configuration of your face is what it is. The sound of your voice is what it is. Your ability to socialize tends to be what it is. Your inability to do certain things, like say sing, and you have a horrible voice for it, it just, I don't know. Anyway. So yeah, apparently I am low on that scale regardless. Orderliness, typical or average. You are typical or average in orderliness. Orderliness is an aspect of conscientiousness. Your score puts you at the 54th percentile. Typically, orderly people are neither particularly disturbed nor disgusted by mess and chaos. They keep everything moderately tidy and organized. They don't think in terms of simple black and white. In their world, there are many shades of gray. Excuse me. They don't rely over much on schedules, lists, or routines, preferring to take things as they come. They are not overly oriented toward detail, rigidly rule-abiding, or judgmental. They like routine and predictability under some circumstances, but don't mind if such things are disrupted. They can manage complex, sensitive processes when supervised properly and carefully, but may have to be reminded to pay proper attention and maintain focus. They can, however, tolerate the mess, disruption, and intervening periods of chaos that may accompany creative endeavor. Those who are average in orderliness are no more likely to be political conservatives or liberals, as they will tend towards the former, blah, blah, blah. This one was no shock to me. You are exceptionally low in extraversion, which is the primary dimension of positive emotion in the Big Five personality trait scientific model. Extraversion is a measure of general sensitivity to positive emotions, such as hope, joy, anticipation, and approach, particularly in social situations. The two aspects of extraversion are enthusiasm and assertiveness. Now, the positive emotions like hope and joy and anticipation, I have very limited degrees of any of that, especially the first two. And it's not a quick wake up one day kind of thing. I mean, I'm in my mid-40s. I have a whole lifetime of depression and misery. That's just a natural part of my character. So I'm not terribly shocked by this one at all. I'm in a very low percentile. Since extraversion and introversion are poles that denote the ends of the spectrum for this trait, you can also think of yourself as exceedingly introverted. I literally use that very phrase myself. People with exceptionally low levels of extraversion are extraordinarily less enthusiastic, talkative, assertive in social situations, or gregarious. They find social contact rapidly draining and tiring, and uncontrollably crave time alone to recharge. That is 100% me. They rarely plan parties, tell jokes, make people laugh, or volunteer for community activities. Those are all absolute zero for me. I do not do any of those things. They are much more likely to be depressed and to have lower levels of self-esteem, particularly if they are high in neuroticism. They are generally much more pessimistic about the past, present, and future. Yep. People exceptionally low in extraversion keep almost everything to themselves, feeling no compulsion to share their general thoughts with other people. I do that sometimes on my YouTube channel, but that is about the extent of it. They are not at all self-disclosing either and warm up very slowly to other people. They are markedly uncomfortable in group-oriented situations, much preferring one-to-one interactions, again, particularly when high in neuroticism. They are very much less likely to speak up in meetings, will almost never speak first, and must be prodded for an opinion. They are remarkably less likely to captivate and convince, especially in groups, and will very rarely be the first to act in an ambiguous situation. Guilty. Those exceptionally low in extraversion are much more suited to occupations that require working alone or with a few other well-known individuals, such as computer programming or accounting, maybe in my case, moving pallets in a warehouse. Jobs involving sales, persuasion, working in groups, and public speaking do not at all appeal to them, and they are very unlikely to be successful at such things, particularly if they are also high in neuroticism or low in conscientiousness. People exceptionally low in extraversion are, however, very rarely impulsive, even when offered the opportunity to do something particularly exciting or fun. They very rarely choose to sacrifice the future to the present when something social or group-oriented beckons. They would much rather be alone to study and work. They do not find opportunities to chat, joke, and socialize distracting. This is particularly the case if they are also high in conscientiousness. However, when people are very introverted and conscientious, they are less productive than when extroverted and conscientious, perhaps because they have lower levels of energy. When very introverted and comparatively unconscientious, however, they are more productive than when extroverted and unconscientious. People exceptionally low in extraversion are much less dominant in social situations, particularly when they are also high in agreeableness. Less agreeable extroverts tend to be self-centered, something that could be made worse if they are also low in conscientiousness. Uncommonly introverted people are protected against such tendencies. Enthusiasm exceptionally low. You are exceptionally low in enthusiasm. Enthusiasm is an aspect of extraversion. Individuals who are exceptionally low in enthusiasm are very quiet and remarkably unexcitable. They can be extremely hard to get to know as they are neither chatty nor bubbly. When they do talk, and they do so rarely, it tends to be about things in which they find exceptional interest. Get me on the subject of music, for example. I guess that can get me going, but they open up to other people with great difficulty, particularly in larger social gatherings or parties. They laugh very much more rarely than others. They clearly prefer solitude and find it difficult to enjoy themselves around other people. Facts. At most, they can handle social contact in tiny doses. They are extremely private people on the loner side of the distribution and are neither positive nor optimistic. They very actively avoid the spotlight and, if creative, may find performing aversive and draining. They seek out stimulation, excitement, activity, or fun extraordinarily rarely, and if they do so, very much prefer quieter activities, perhaps like attempting to make ASMR. People exceptionally low in enthusiasm are highly solitary, finding it uncommonly difficult to generate a felt sense of excitement when offered the opportunity to engage in something that others might find engaging or entertaining. Enthusiasm is not strongly associated with political preference, either conservative or liberal. Assertiveness, very low. You are very low in assertiveness. Assertiveness is an aspect of extraversion, 9th percentile. People very low in assertiveness are not take-charge types. They put their own opinions forward very rarely and with reservation, and do not dominate and control social situations. Such people are not known for their ability to captivate social groups and manifest very little of the communication style often associated with leadership. This can be a marked handicap when they are knowledgeable, competent, and able, but causes much less trouble when they aren't. Those very low in assertiveness are very infrequently people of action. They almost never leap in heedlessly and in consequence allow others to lead the way. They are very much less impulsive in consequence and almost never act without thinking. Neuroticism, very high. You are very high in neuroticism, which is the primary dimension of negative emotion in the Big Five personality trait scientific model. Neuroticism is a measure of general sensitivity to negative emotions, such as pain, sadness, irritable or defensive anger, fear, and anxiety. The two aspects of neuroticism are withdrawal and volatility. So, prior to knowing what neuroticism actually meant, at least by these definitions, I guess I am about as neurotic as they come. Now that I know what it means, people with very high levels of neuroticism are more likely to think that things have gone wrong in the past, are going wrong now, and will continue to go wrong in the future. Two of those three things, and that statement right there, have always proven to be the case for me. I mean, almost without fail. So, they are also more likely to be unhappy, anxious, and irritable when just thinking or remembering, and when they encounter a genuine problem. They have very low levels of self-esteem, particularly when they are also low in extraversion. Neuroticism is a risk factor for anxiety disorders and depression. No kidding. Very high levels of neuroticism are likely to interfere with both success and satisfaction in relationships and career, with the strongest effect on relationships. Very high levels of neuroticism are associated with exaggerated concern about mental and physical health, far more frequent physician and emergency room visits, and atypically high levels of absenteeism at work and at school. At least that one does not, the last part does not apply at least. So I got that going for me. People with very high levels of neuroticism appear to be fundamentally risk-adverse, which means they will avoid recreational, career, financial, and social situations where the possibility of loss is high. Such people appear to be very much concerned with maintaining their current status rather than enhancing it. Perhaps this is a good strategy in genuinely dangerous or uncertain times. Withdrawal, very high. You are very high in withdrawal. Withdrawal is an aspect of neuroticism. 93rd percentile. Individuals very high in withdrawal may feel extreme levels of anticipatory anxiety. This makes it very much more challenging for them to approach new, uncertain, unexpected, threatening, or complex situations. They are instead very much more likely to avoid or withdraw in the face of the unknown and unexpected. People very high in withdrawal are unusually more likely to feel sad, lonesome, disappointed, and grief-stricken. I'm about that way 99% of my days. I mean, they have very high levels of doubt and worry, become embarrassed easily. That I do not, for sure. Are self-conscious and get discouraged rapidly in the face of threat and punishment. That part may be true. Their anticipatory anxiety is very likely to be general. They are very sensitive to social rejection and can be easily hurt. Once hurt, frightened, or anxious as well, it takes them a long time to recover. Perhaps people very high in withdrawal are extremely concerned that something bad might happen, while people very high in volatility get very upset if something bad does happen. Technically, withdrawal has been associated with activity in the brain systems that regulate passive avoidance. Volatility, high. Volatility is an aspect of neuroticism. The other aspect of neuroticism is withdrawal. I am in the 84th percentile. Individuals high in volatility tend to vary in their mood. They can be irritable, reacting strongly to disappointment, frustration, pain, and the threat of social isolation. They can lash out and are relatively easily annoyed. That's about right. I do have a low tolerance level for certain types of stuff. They are more likely to act out or verbally express their frustration, disappointment, and irritability. They can be stirred up and upset and, once angry or irritated, take a longer than average time to calm down. They can be argumentative and lose their composure. They can be provocative in a dispute, particularly if also low in agreeableness. Volatile people tend to get upset if something bad does happen, while people high in withdrawal tend to be concerned that something bad might happen. Technically, volatility has been associated with activity in the brain systems that regulate fight, flight, or freeze. Openness. Typical or average. You are typical or average in openness, which is the primary dimension of creativity, artistic interest, and intelligence, particularly verbal intelligence, in the Big Five personality trait scientific model. Openness is a measure of interest in novelty, art, literature, abstract thinking, philosophy, as well as sensitivity to aesthetic, emotions, and beauty. The two aspects of openness are intellect and aesthetics. People with typical levels of openness are as smart and creative as others on average. They are not generally characterized as exploratory or visionary, but have their moments of insight and realization. They are sometimes interested in learning for its own sake and show some interest in acquiring new abilities and skills. They are not overwhelmingly curious and are not strikingly interested in abstract thinking, philosophy, or the meaning of belief systems and ideologies. That whole statement to me is broad because certain concepts of philosophy and belief systems do appeal to me, especially in the case of religion. I am markedly an atheist at best. I've always favored kind of the concepts behind LaVeyan Satanism, which is more an atheistic and humanistic approach, because for every religion that is commonly practiced, and especially the really flamboyant preachy types that preach it now, never seem to explain or take into account that recorded, proven human history, like physically proven history. There are religions and cultures that predate theirs, like Christians and Muslims, for example. There's culture that exists before all of that that's never even explored or talked about, and reading those kind of, like, reading into that sort of stuff is interesting to me. And then I've spent time studying a lot of different belief systems, like different forms of Satanism and Thelema, like reading Aleister Crowley and various pagan and witchcraft rites and things like that, and rituals. I've had phases of life where I've been extremely interested in reading about those things to understand them and see if I believe them or not, basically. So anyway, but to say I'm not strikingly interested in those things, I don't know. I don't know if I agree with that or not. I don't think so. But anyway, they will attend cultural events such as movies, concerts, dance recitals, plays, poetry readings, gallery openings, and art shows, but do not find themselves compelled to do so. Concerts, a bit compelled, yeah. When it's music that, or I should say bands that are particularly favorites of mine, I'll be going. So I do, go to a lot of concerts, a lot. They sometimes enjoy writing and will occasionally enjoy encountering and trying to solve a complex problem or explore abstract ideas. They tend to read an average amount, but more mainstream material. Again, a piece of that I agree with, and a piece I don't, because mainstream material, I don't read much of any of that. I've never been much of a fiction reader, and so anyway, they have a normal range of interests and a reasonable vocabulary. They can think and learn reasonably quickly. They find themselves formulating new ideas and are articulate enough to get their thoughts across, particularly if average or above in extraversion. People average in openness now and then see the old things in new ways, but are also satisfied with the tried and true. They can solve day-to-day problems well and sometimes seek out a more difficult challenge. People who are average or typical in openness can adapt reasonably well to situations or occupations that are routinized and predictable. They have little trouble fitting in at the bottom of hierarchies. They can be better suited than those who are more open to entry-level, repetitive, rote positions because they aren't compelled to think up new ways to do things. They are not uncreative thinkers, but are less commonly known as creative or revolutionary. They rarely shake things up, particularly if they are also agreeable and less assertive. Individuals, average in openness, may be entrepreneurial in spirit, but they also appreciate conventional employment. They have no more than average interest in creating new ventures, whether for profit, curiosity, or personal transformation. At least moderately high levels of openness appear necessary to the formation and leadership of business and other forms of complex organization, although conscientiousness appears required for the attention to detail and process management that such organizations always need. People typical in openness have an average range of interests. This makes it relatively easy for them to settle on a single path in life, to specialize to a necessary degree, and to create an integrated identity unless they are very high or above in neuroticism and or very low or below in conscientiousness. People characterized by the combination of moderately high openness and very high or above levels of neuroticism can undermine their own convictions and beliefs by questioning and making themselves lost and anxious. Open, unconscientious people tend to be underachievers, particularly if also above average in neuroticism. Such people appear to have the capability to succeed, can learn quickly, and are creative, but they can have some trouble implementing their ideas. Openness is the dimension that best predicts political allegiance. Yada yada. I don't care about that. This one was my favorite. Intellect, moderately low. So I read that one several times because I thought to myself, I have a moderately low intellect. Ouch. I mean, maybe I'm not shocked, but then again, I kind of was. So below that, they added here, note, do not confuse the personality aspect of intellect with IQ. Intellect is a measure of interest in abstract ideas essentially, while IQ is a measure of processing speed, verbal ability, working memory, and problem-solving capacity, and is better measured with a formal IQ test. It is perfectly possible to have a high IQ and a low score on the personality trait of intellect. So it did take me a couple of times to understand that. The concept of a personality trait versus IQ. I guess I thought that IQ and intellect were reasonably interchangeable things, and that is obviously not the case. I've never been able to find a lot of positive traits about myself that I would claim, like outwardly, straight up claim. But no one really wants to believe that they're dumb. Basically, that they're simple. But of all my bad traits, my poor traits, I never really thought of myself as particularly dumb or simple. And maybe not the best at putting together a presentation to phrase things. Sometimes I can stumble on my words and whatnot, but I always thought otherwise. I was fairly articulate, but anyway, so separating intellect as a personality trait versus IQ, very different things, I guess. So let's look at this. People moderately low in intellect are less likely to evince interest in ideas and abstract concepts. They tend not to appreciate learning about philosophical ideas. I don't know that, again, I don't know about that one. But they don't want to be overloaded with information, particularly if it is complex. They are less intellectually curious and will rarely voluntarily tackle and solve complex abstract problems. They are less likely to engage in issue-oriented discussions or to enjoy idea-centered books. They can be somewhat less articulate, particularly if average or lower in extraversion, and may have some difficulty formulating and communicating their ideas. People moderately low in intellect may have a vocabulary of somewhat less than normal breadth and depth, and like to stick with the tried and true, rather than learning new ideas and skills. They will be less likely to seek out or generate novel, creative concepts, or finding and adapting to new experiences and situations. People moderately low in intellect find complex, rapidly changing occupations less to their liking, and are less likely to do well at them unless high in conscientiousness and low in neuroticism. They are better suited to stable, straightforward, and more traditional occupations where the rules for success are well defined and tend not to change. Liberals are higher in intellect than conservatives, although the biggest difference between the two is openness at the trait level. Aesthetics, typical or average. You are typical or average in aesthetics. Aesthetics is an aspect of openness. The other aspect of openness is intellect. In the original Big Five aspect scale model, the openness factor was entitled openness to experience, and its aspects were called intellect and openness. For the sake of clarity, we have deviated from this and use openness or openness to experience to refer to the factor level trait, and intellect and aesthetics to refer to its aspects. Generally speaking, a person's aesthetic score reflects their creativity. People who are average in aesthetics find beauty reasonably important. They may enjoy an outlet for their creative ability, but will not wither away without it. They can appreciate art or beautiful crafts. They are somewhat sensitive to color and architectural form. They sometimes enjoy collecting, but it is rare for them to pursue it passionately. Now, I've told my story in the past from young childhood through adulthood of my drive to collect music, my music, and so on. So they are reasonably imaginative and may daydream and reflect on occasion. They tend to enjoy music, often of the more conventional popular forms. And may be somewhat musical or artistic themselves. Both of these are rare in the general population. They do not generally become so immersed in a book or movie or in their own thoughts that they lose touch with the outside world. They are interested in, but by no means obsessed with, beauty, creativity, and art. They tend to be quite stable and reasonably conventional, particularly if they are also average or above in conscientiousness. At least moderate levels of creativity tend to be necessary for entrepreneurial success and prove comparatively useful at the top of hierarchies, even in very conservative occupations such as banking, accounting, and law, which need creative people in leadership positions to provide new vision and direction. And that is the end. So that was a lot of wordy stuff going on there. And so there you go. Like I said, I don't know. I would assume that this whole assessment and model is not picture perfect, 100% accurate of a person, because I think we're all, as creatures, too variable to be nailed down so precisely. I would say, though, a majority of that report is, whether I like it or not, me. But again, a couple of things. That statement about if you're interested in music, it tends to be of the mainstream variety. I swear I rarely find people that even know half of my music, and music is, to me, a lifeblood, if you will. The industriousness bit, again, I've always taken my job very seriously, and I do not slack. That is absolutely not one of my work traits. I've never been told that in my entire life. And then some of the other things, though, that I learned about are true to a T. I am reasonably apathetic. I am not friendly. I am not engaging, because I don't I don't even know how to really be those things. So that's why I, rather than go out in public and be an a-hole or be rude or what have you, I just keep quiet. I keep my eyes to the floor and get in and out as quick as I can, because really doing anything else makes me incredibly uncomfortable, and I do not I do not want to I don't want to be somewhere longer than I have to be. So like I said, in and out. I don't want to try to be rude to people and be aggressive towards people because I want to get the hell out of there. But at the end of the day, I want to get the hell out of there. So, and then the anxiety and depression, absolutely. I don't even deny any of that. But anyway, take a look. This is me. I am what this type of human looks like. Like I said in the beginning of the video, what is that person that you don't even remember 5 seconds after you meet them? The weirdo, the anxiety-ridden, depressed, introverted, quiet, dodgy, nearly non-existent human. What does that person look like? Especially when you take a more psychoanalytical approach like this assessment and just look at that person. This is what they look like. That's me. I am that person. And considering I'm not exceptionally rare, there's a lot of these stats and traits that apply to plenty of other people. So this is who we are. We are the ones that don't have friends. We're never popular. We're never successful. We're never anybody's first choice for anything. We're never, that's it. So like I said, this test is at understandmyself.com. It is founded by Dr. Jordan Peterson and a few other clinical psychologists who, the whole science of psychology, psychoanalysis, things like that is what they do. So I thought this test was worth taking. I really wanted to see what it would come up with. So, anyways, if you sat through all this absolute boringness, kudos to you. If anything, I might have actually done the job of putting someone to sleep, almost like a classroom lecture. But such as it is, or for whatever it is, it's the underconfident human signing out. Have a good evening.